Well, I'm really looking forward to participating over the next 2 days, and I spent part of yesterday and today reading through all of the papers that you folks wrote, which was an overwhelming experience to try to get through of all that information, which I'm sure some of you have also been through as well. And so I think my task here today is to, in the context of, I think, the larger discussions, talk about the natural and beneficial values of the floodplains. And in and around all those other activities that I guess just got summarized, when I went to work for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in 1988, I want you to remember that year, 1988, I was given an assignment, and I knew it was one of those assignments that they give the new person because nobody else wants to do it. And it was to be on the Interagency Task Force for Floodplain Management. So for a number of years, I was the liaison over there, as you know, and it was a wonderful experience. And so even though it isn't reflected in my resume, I've been dealing with floodplain issues in addition to wetland issues for a number of years. And I think that it's important, and one of the points I want to make during this talk is that we're not going to be able to address water quantity and flood issues unless we address them with water quality issues. And that's why this discussion on natural and beneficial values of the floodplain is so important, is because they are part of the same much larger problem. And to sort of put that in context, I'm going to do a little comparison of the natural and beneficial values of the floodplains and the natural and beneficial values of wetlands, which are surprisingly consistent with each other. Talk a little bit of how we've made progress in the arena of wetlands policy over the last 20 or 30 years. I've sensed a little jealousy in a couple of the papers with respect to the progress wetlands has made compared to flood risk, which is surprising given the way, from my perspective, we've kind of lurched along during that same time period and have not necessarily felt successful. But when you look back, you can put it in a context and tie it up in a nice, pretty package, and it looks pretty good. And then make some suggestions about how we can perhaps progress together over the next couple days and hopefully in the coming years. You can Google values and functions of the floodplain and values and functions of the wetlands, and you come up with lists that are pretty similar. And these don't track exactly, but over on the wetland side, you've got wildlife, habitat, flood protection, water quality. You can read the list. And the floodplain list basically covers the same information. So floodplain functions and values, wetland functions and values are surprisingly similar, although while I think there's pretty good awareness that wetlands provide some, if not all, of the functions on this list, I don't think people think about floodplains in the context of wildlife, groundwater recharge, some of these others. And that's reflected when you go looking around for images of floodplains versus wetlands. With wetlands, you get all these nice graphics of, you know, the containing sediment and filtering and dissipating stream energy. And when you go look to find something similar about floodplains, you get the 100-year floodplain. And that's pretty much it. And then if you're trying to find floodplain functions and values, you can find a lot of pictures of floods overflowing the banks and going into floodplains, but you don't find pictures or discussion about these other values related to floodplains. So this is an area where certainly, even though wetlands and floodplains have similar functions and values, I think the public's perception of those values and functions are much, much different. And then we get to mapping. And if you think a little bit about how we map wetlands versus how we map floodplains, we map wetlands, and Bill Weiland in the audience is an expert on this, and he's going to have to review my talk afterwards to see if I get some of this other information correct or not. But basically, you know, the mapping's done based on vegetation, and that can be seen from the sky using various kinds of imagery. And what we're doing is drawing the boundaries around those wetlands, which is a direct reflection of the functions and values of the wetlands. They, you know, and relate to why we value them for wildlife, for floodplains. And you'll see there's, it looks like those wetlands on the wetland picture there are pretty much following the river. On the other side, you can see that, once again, it's the 100-year floodplain boundary, mostly in urban areas, not so much in the rural areas of our country. So if you want to talk about getting people to support, your perspectives and policies and ideas, you need to think about who your friends are, who it is that you're going to work with. And over the years, one thing that's been a benefit in working in wetlands is that we have a lot of friends. Were it not for hunters, duck hunters, and other hunters in general, we would not have wetlands protection in this country like it is today, because the early North American Waterfowl Management Plan and the efforts to protect the flyways and whatnot are really what generated and formed the basis of much of wetlands protection in this country. And although I think we've diversified since then, still that's really been the backbone, looking back over the years, of protection. And yet I don't think that in many cases duck hunters perceive that floodplains are something that they should be concerned about protecting. And so this is it's a little bit facetious, but here's a list of our, in wetlands, typical advocates, people that we can look to support policies. And I don't know, when I look around who is in this audience today, I'm not sure that all of these groups are well represented. The one down at the bottom, the Not in My Backyard group, I'm not sure whether that's a benefit or a problem, because what typically happens in wetlands, I don't know that you see it so much in floodplains, is people don't care about wetlands until they find out that their neighbor is going to fill it. And then they become very concerned about wetlands because they don't want that fill to take place and alter the landscape around them. And they're just extremely distressed to find that all wetlands are not protected and that people can get permits and fill and make changes. But this is something to think about during the forum, particularly as you're thinking about messages and who you're trying to reach and who you're going to bring on board, because I think that having ideas that are attractive to a larger group of advocates and partners is going to be key. I think we've plumbed the existing list of sort of likely suspects.